There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear.
That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
George Bernard Shaw once wrote, "Some people see things as they are and say, why? I dream things that never were and say, why not?"
There is nothing wrong with America that cannot be cured by what is right with America.
Change will not come if we wait for some other person or if we wait for some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for.
The Patriotic Progressive, for truth, justice, and the democratic way. And now your host, Stephen Hanks.
Good morning to all of you out there in Sedona and throughout the Verde Valley listening right now on this October 5th, 2024 through KAZM 106.5 FM and 780 AM Mellow Mountain Radio. Like the announcer said, my name is Stephen Hanks, and this radio show, which is heard every Saturday morning at 8 a.m., is called The Patriotic Progressive, for truth, justice, and the democratic way. And I also want to welcome folks from all over Arizona and around the country who may be tuning into the live stream on mellowmountainradio.com, and anyone who is listening to the podcast version on Apple or Amazon Podcasts, my YouTube channel, Spotify, and now you can also listen to the podcast on my Substack newsletter at Patriotic Progressive. And folks, it's October 5th, and you know what that means. We are 1 month away from probably the most consequential election of all of our lifetimes. And I know they say that every election cycle, but this time it's really true. So, my friends, if you listened to the show last Saturday morning, you might remember that I did a special musical episode of The Patriotic Progressive, featuring songs delivered by 10 New York cabaret performers during a fundraising show for Democratic congressional candidates that I produced in New York last May. And the reason for that show was because while you were listening on KAZM Mellow Mountain Radio this past Saturday, I was preparing for another fundraising show that day to bring in bucks for the Kamala Harris for President campaign. And boy, it turned out to be a terrific show with a packed house at Don't Tell Mama on Restaurant Row in Manhattan, with some of New York's most accomplished women cabaret performers singing songs of freedom, equality, and democracy. And we managed to raise $1,200, which is pretty darn good when it's a $20 cover charge, and the club only seats about 80 people. So I came back to Sedona extremely pleased about that effort. What I wasn't happy about when I was back in Sedona was actually something I observed on my way to this radio station this morning. So I live in the village of Oak Creek, which is south of the center of Sedona. And on my drive north on Route 179, on my way to where the radio station is situated, I saw some small, you see a slew of political campaign signs right now, and that's totally fine. But I also saw some small yard signs planted on the side of the road next to a few of the local service stations. They were really like tiny squares, stuck in right off of the road near the service stations. And these signs simply said, one of them said, Trump is for secure borders, Harris is for open borders. While the other sign claimed, Trump is for low taxes, Harris is for high taxes. Now, what's infuriating about these MAGA messages is like almost everything else out of the mouths of Trump and J.D. Vance and all of their sycophantic supporters, whether in Congress or the fawning lemmings at Trump rallies, they are just blatant lies. They seem innocuous. They seem like, one of the old debates that Republicans and Democrats used to have. You're for this and we're for that. But the reason they're lies is because Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are not for open borders. And Donald Trump is really not for secure borders. If Donald Trump and the Republican Party as it exists now were for secure borders, they wouldn't have killed the bipartisan border security legislation that Biden administration wanted to pass, but Donald Trump killed it because he wanted to keep that issue going. And he's still railing about the border situation and spewing one lie after another. As far as the taxes go, do we have to remind everybody that the only thing that the Trump administration accomplished when he was in office between 2017 and 2020 was a huge tax cut for millionaires and billionaires? So, and Kamala Harris is not for raising taxes on the middle class, even the low upper middle class. So, the gaslighting continues, and it's just outrageous. And oh God, I can't wait until Kamala wins and this is all over. So that's my first rant on that. It's because of the extreme right-wing gaslighting, like those messages, why we need Democrats to be elected up and down the ballot. From Kamala Harris and Tim Walz to local, state, county, and city officials. And that's why I have the guests who will be joining me on the show by phone this morning. One is Mike Fogel, who is the Democratic candidate for the extremely important state Senate seat in District 1 in Arizona, which is even more important because his opponent is the utterly toxic election denier, vaccine denier, Trump MAGA stooge, Mark Finchem. My other guest today is Aubrey Sonderegger, who is the Democratic candidate for Coconino County Recorder, which is a vital race because it's all about overseeing and securing elections in that county. You'll learn a lot more about Mike and Aubrey and their campaigns in a few minutes. But first, I have to comment a bit about some of the highlights of another crazy week in this political campaign season. So I wasn't planning on talking about this issue on this show, but there doesn't seem to be a morning that goes by when I wake up and look at my social media feeds, which I know I shouldn't do because my blood pressure is already a problem, where I don't see some story about the latest voter suppression outrage from right-wing Republican election boards or legislatures. The latest one I saw today, that for the first time in 20 years, Purdue University in Indiana, a very red state, will not have an on-campus polling place for the November election. This is just another example of how the right-wing Republican Party tries to suppress and nullify votes of certain groups like college students, and they also do it with minorities and senior citizens who they know are going to vote Democratic. So that drove me crazy right off the bat this morning. I want to say a little bit about the Kamala Harris, Liz Cheney sisterhood romance that's going on right now. Most Democrats will tell you, especially liberals and progressives, that there is not a thing that they ever agreed with Liz Cheney about and her father, Dick Cheney. However, Liz Cheney is obviously showing that she's a patriot. She's supporting a Democrat who she said this is going to be the first time she's voting for a Democrat. And when you looked at Liz Cheney campaigning with Kamala Harris, what it said to me, or what it reminded me of, is how many millions of women in this country are supporting a candidate like Donald Trump and, by extension, J.D. Vance. It has just been incomprehensible to me how any women in this country can support a guy who is a total misogynist. And when you look at Liz Cheney up there, it reminds you about just how repulsive people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, the whole slew of Republican women are at this point in time. And I also have to talk a little bit about that Tim Walz, J.D. Vance debate. And I'm not going to go into too much of it, but all I'll say is this. It wasn't as crazy as the Trump-Biden debate, which we all know what that was about and what the result of that was. But I got to tell you, on this debate, about 15 minutes in, I was just getting totally disgusted by the whole thing, basically because it was a debate that was totally unnecessary. These are just television shows. I've just become sick of the lead up to these debates. They're just ridiculous. You know, you can't get substantial policy conversations giving candidates 1 or 2 minutes, especially when one of them is just going to be up there spewing lie after lie like J.D. Vance did. You know, if you remember the Kamala Harris, Mike Pence vice president debate in 2020, there's only 2 things that people remember about that debate. One is that Kamala Harris told Mike Pence to let her speak and not talk over her. And the second was that there was a fly on Mike Pence's head. That's all they remember. You know what the only thing they're going to remember about the Walz-Vance debate? The very end of the debate, when J.D. Vance still is denying that Trump lost the 2020 election. And that's the soundbite that ran after that debate all over the media. So, you know, that's my take on the 2 most recent things that happened. There's a lot more, the Jack Smith reissuing his indictment of Donald Trump, which after Trump loses the election is surely going to have him land in jail, but that's a conversation for another day. So, folks, the theme of this episode of the Patriotic Progressive is part 2 of my 2024 Arizona Democratic candidate interviews. And I want to start with Mike Fogel, who, as I mentioned earlier, is running for the Arizona State Senate seat for District 1 against MAGA Republican Mark Finchem. Now, Mike ran for this seat in 2022 and lost to Republican Ken Bennett, who lost his primary election this year to Mark Finchem. I met Mike at a recent Democrats of the Red Rocks picnic, and he told me a little bit about his career history. And when I was listening to Mike, I felt like I was chatting with the local version of Tim Walz. Mike lives in Chino Valley, where he and his wife have raised 3 sons. He's a retired educator of 30-plus years who worked in the Chino Valley School District as a decorated high school teacher, winning basketball coach, and results-oriented administrator. He was once the head women's basketball coach at Northeastern Illinois University in Chicago. And I totally relate to Mike because over my checkered career, I've coached many baseball and soccer teams. So we have that in common. He currently serves on the Chino Valley School District and Polara Health Boards of Directors. And he's also volunteered with the Yavapai County Democratic Party. My other guest, who will be coming in a little bit later, is Aubrey Sonderegger, who is the Democratic candidate for Coconino County Recorder. Aubrey grew up in the Southwest and has been a resident of Flagstaff since 2011. She is a committed mom and outdoor enthusiast whose political activism began in earnest in 2016, just in the nick of time. Aubrey has worked to defend voting rights and elect people into government that will uphold the ideals of democracy and civil rights for every citizen. She has held various elected positions in the Coconino County Democratic Party, through which she promoted civic engagement from the very diverse demographics of Coconino County. So, Mike and Aubrey, I know I've had you listening to me for a while, but now I want to welcome you to the Patriotic Progressive.
Thank you for hosting this show and inviting me to participate, Stephen.
Hold on, we're having a little issue with the phone reception right now.
Okay.
Keep going. Oh, Mike, start again.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I just mentioning that and thanking you for hosting the show and inviting me to participate today.
Okay, and Aubrey,
it's a great honor.
Aubrey, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Excellent. Okay, so Mike, let me start with you.
Yes.
I don't mean to start. I hope you don't take this as a negative, but I think it's important to bring up right off the bat. In your 2022 race against Ken Bennett, you lost by 42,000 votes, unfortunately. So this district overwhelmingly leads Republican. So my question is, why on earth did you want to take another shot at this?
Well, for the same reason I did in 2022. There needs to be a balanced voice coming from Yavapai County citizens. Yavapai County has for too long been simply a one-party county. That's the Republican. And there are plenty of issues that are not being addressed by our Republican opponents who have represented Yavapai County for decades and decades.
Can I just stop you there? Can you tell our audience a little bit about what area Yavapai County covers?
Oh, certainly. So Yavapai County, or LD1, is made up of largely Yavapai County. There's a sliver of Coconino County on the east side of Sedona that is also part of Legislative District 1. And then there is a sliver of Yavapai County in the southern part of the county that is not part of LD1. But for the most part, we're talking about, in all practicality, Yavapai County equals Legislative District 1.
Gotcha. Okay, so for this election... go ahead.
Yeah, so to continue responding to your question, it was also important to me then, and it is now, that I run as a clean elections candidate, and I have done so now twice with a slate of candidates, my colleagues who are running for the two House seats, Marcia Smith and Jay Ruby, who are running for the House seats. We are running a clean election slate and a campaign that we call Clean Slate for Democracy. Democracy obviously means voices and participation from across the entire spectrum, and so that's what we want to represent.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up because that was going to be my next question. For those of us, and I include myself in this, who aren't quite familiar with how the Clean Slate for Democracy idea evolved, and I know you had this in 22. How did this idea of candidates running together under this banner come about, and how it works for the campaign?
Certainly. So clean elections candidates, by law, cannot receive donations from PACs or unions or business people or essentially anyone. And our campaigns are funded by state funds. The idea of three of us running as a team is really the original idea came from Jay Ruby, who was our campaign manager back in 2022, because we pool our resources together so that we can extend the effectiveness of those dollars, if you will, and we can, as a result, pooling all of our resources, we can get a lot of damage done. We can do a lot of promotions that would be much more difficult for a single candidate. For instance, ads in newspapers, ads in social networks, mailers, direct mailers. And so it worked effectively for us in 2022, and I believe so is doing so again.
So one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show is because you're running against Mark Finchem, who is, to me, as toxic as they come. I mean, this is a guy,
yes,
just for my audience's edification, this is a guy who, before the 2022 election, was brought to Sedona by the Republicans of the Red Rocks to speak at a showing at the Sedona Film Festival of this totally discredited movie, 2,000 Mules, which was supposedly about, or was about the supposed vote harvesting that the Democrats were doing in the 2020 election. The producer of the movie has been indicted and jailed. And as I said, it's been totally discredited. Mark Finchem is in the Kerry Lake School of Election Denial, Vaccine Denial. I just, under no circumstances should anybody in Legislative District 1 want him to be in office. So given the margin of your last race and how toxic Mark Finchem is, what do you think your chances are against him in the election?
There is a little disconnect there. I didn't hear the last part of the question. Sorry, Stephen.
No, given that he's much more toxic a candidate than Ken Bennett was, and everybody knows he's sort of in the Kerry Lake school of the Republican MAGA party. What do you think your chances are against him this cycle?
Well, I think my chances increased immensely. I have spoken to several Republican leaders, prominent Republican leaders in Yavapai County, who has said to me directly, there's no way I will vote for Mark Finchem. You, Mike, are more than likely to get my vote and my support. I have also come to learn that it is believed that many of the supporters of Ken Bennett will shift to voting for me because they cannot stomach the idea of voting for that MAGA extremist.
That's great to hear.
Yeah. And in fact, Ken Bennett said to me that I would guess 10,000 of my supporters in the primary would not vote for Finchem. Now, we're seeing this kind of reaction of moderate Republicans and independents throughout the country and throughout the state. I have said from February, from the beginning of this election cycle, that there will be many Mitt Romney and Jeff Flake Republicans that will not vote for the MAGA movement. And it's proven to be correct. Jeff Flake just came out this past week in support of Kamala Harris.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure that we will hear more from Mitt Romney as they get closer to the election, because I'm not sure he has come out and has endorsed her directly yet. We also see this in the city of Mesa, where Mayor Giles has said that character and ethics and morality matter, and so he is supporting Democrats up and down the ticket. And so this is also true in Yavapai County. So it's going to be an interesting race, and I think the margin between myself and Mark Finchem will certainly change in this election.
That would be great news and great to see. So looking at the Arizona legislature as a whole, I don't know what your radar is on this, but what do you think the chances are that the Democrats can flip the Arizona State House and Senate a month from now, especially considering how close the difference between the Democrats and Republicans are at this point?
This is big time on my radar.
Okay.
And I'll say so because the Democratic caucus and the Arizona legislative campaign, Democratic Party campaign. Okay, I can't remember all the words. Essentially, the committee who's responsible for getting Democrats elected put on a forum, a workshop in August to bring all candidates and legislators who are already in the legislature together to talk about just that question. Most pundits around the country have said and pointed to Arizona as being one of two states most likely to flip the legislature from red to blue. But a lot of money has been pouring into the state to do so. Mm. Now, there are about 7 really identified legislative districts that are competitive, considered competitive, and all could make a play for making that change in the legislature. And as I have been talking to people working in those districts very closely, districts like LD 16 and LD 17 are very likely to put Democrats into the legislature. And as my wife likes to say, Mike, what are you going to do when you win on November 5th to get ready to go down to the legislature? I simply say, well, if that is to happen, we will know for sure that the legislature will have flipped from red to blue.
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, that provides me with a great segue to my next question, which is, let's assume that you do win that seat, which I, for one, really hope you can do. And I urge all of my listeners to support you and the other Clean Slate for Democracy candidates. So what would be your main priorities once you get into the Arizona State Senate?
So my number one priority, and this should be not surprising to anyone with my career background, is to straighten out the absolute disaster that the Republican Party has created, the crisis of public education in the state of Arizona.
Oh, absolutely.
We're rated 50. So that's number one. And I want to remind everyone, we're 51st. Have the 51st rating, the lowest rating of all the states in the country, and that includes Washington, D.C. That's why it's 51.
Right.
In terms of funding, in terms of student outcomes, and in terms of support for universities. So this is abysmal, and that needs to be changed in order for us to maintain a strong democracy and to continue to build a strong middle class, because we know those two things go hand in hand with strong public schools. That is our American legacy, and it is a disgrace that Arizona does not honor that legacy and support appropriately public schools across the state of Arizona. So that's number one. Number two, we are particularly focused, the campaign, on protecting Arizona's water. This is a crucial issue to everyone who lives in Yavapai County. And then, of course, we want to make sure to guarantee reproductive freedom for women. And those have been the top issues we've been campaigning on throughout this period.
Yeah. Since you brought up the reproductive freedom issue, what's your sense of how the fact that codifying abortion rights in the Arizona laws, which is going to be on the ballot this year, how positively do you see that impacting all of the legislature races for Democrats?
Well, it's a huge issue, and as you were in your introductory remarks today, you asked the question: how could any woman support Trump, the MAGA movement, etc.?
Right.
And especially as it relates to the Dobbs decision and overturning Roe v. Wade. We have seen how women across the country since that decision have rallied to put reproductive rights into various constitutions in the state constitutions, and I am 100% confident that that will take place in the state of Arizona come November 5th. And that will resolve a lot of the issues around making sure abortion bans are prevented from happening and will not occur in the state of Arizona ever again.
Yeah, that's for sure. So I want to, we're getting toward the end of our conversation before I bring Aubrey in. So I wanted to go to a little lighter note, which is, when we met at the Democrats of the Red Rocks picnic a few weeks ago, we were talking about how your profile matches up pretty well with Tim Walz. And talk a little bit about that, because it was kind of a fun part of our conversation.
Well, Walz has certainly become an inspiration for me because our backgrounds are fairly similar. My family legacy comes from the Red River Valley, which runs right up between Minnesota and North Dakota. So regionally, we have that similarity and small town values, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Then I became a public school educator, social studies teacher, just like Mr. Walz. I became a basketball coach. He was a football coach.
Mm-hmm.
I am a gun-owning hunter, not much of a hunter, more of a fisherman. And have actually hunted for pheasant in the state of Minnesota, like Mr. Walz.
Oh, that's so funny.
It is, isn't it? And I am also, I was the first and only sponsor of the first and only Gay-Straight Alliance at Chino Valley High School. First one in the county, just like Mr. Walz. Let's see.
You guys are brothers from another mother.
Evidently, it is uncanny.
Yeah, that's
absolutely uncanny.
That's amazing. So last thing. So tell our listeners how they can contact you, how they can support the Clean Slate for Democracy in the last month before Election Day.
So you certainly can go to cleanslateazld1.com. That will get you to our website. You can also get onto Instagram at AZLD1Slate. We also have a Facebook presence, Clean Slate AZLD1.
Mm-hmm.
And you can certainly get in contact with us directly using those means.
That's great. So before I let you go, is there anything you just want to leave our listeners with about your candidacy and why they should vote for you?
Well, absolutely. Let's get back to Mark Finchem.
Yep.
He's an outsider. He hasn't even lived in the county.
Mm.
He, of course, has an address because he needed to in order to get onto the ballot. He doesn't live here. He has shown up for, everyone listen to this, 0 forums, 0 debates. We have a CWAG water forum occurring this morning, and he will not be participating in that.
Unbelievable.
He doesn't show up for anything.
That's the case with a lot of the Republican candidates in these races.
Right. So our focus is minding our focus is minding Yavapai County's business. Maybe you've seen that signage around the county, because we don't need an outsider whose only interest is serving the king, Donald Trump, and the MAGA movement that does not serve in any way the needs and the desires of the average Yavapai County citizen. Does he care about us? I doubt it. Could he identify Peoples Valley from Chino Valley, from Williamson Valley to Prescott Valley? Probably not. Has he ever put his feet into Sullivan Lake, which is the source of the Verde River, which I have, and have studied and addressed our critical water issues? He probably has not. And that's probably why he avoided the CWAG forum that I'll be participating in at 10 a.m. this morning. So the choice is pretty clear. I am a fixture of this community. My wife and I and family have put our blood, sweat, and tears into improving the quality of life of all people in Yavapai County. We'll continue to do so when I am in the legislature. And I am, one last point, I am reaching out to all moderate Republicans and independents who I'm sure could not stomach voting for such a candidate as Mark Finchem, and that my views and values are fairly moderate and appeal to a broad spectrum of citizens of Yavapai County.
Yeah,
I hope that all of you will vote for Mike Fogel, and then also my colleagues on the Clean Slate, Jay Ruby and Marcia Smith, for the state House seats. And by the way, everyone, don't forget, you can vote for two who are running for the House seats.
Yeah.
Two.
Very well said. And I of course, based on where I stand from my introduction, that I'm all for you, and I wish you the best of luck. So we'll be pulling for you on Election Day. So let's transition over to our next guest, Aubrey Sonderegger. Aubrey, am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
You're doing an excellent job of pronouncing my last name.
Unbelievable.
I commend people for their trying.
I always have problems with multiple syllable names. Anyway, so let's start with the basics. Tell our listeners what the key aspects of the county recorder's office are, because I don't think everybody is like up to snuff on this, and why you decided to run for this very important, but I believe underrated position in our civic community.
Yeah, absolutely. So to start with, the county recorder's office is one of those obscure offices that should just work and be low drama, and lots of people shouldn't necessarily have to know a lot about it. But it handles all of your property records and deeds, and probably the way that it touches everybody's lives, most importantly, is that it does all of our voter registration and all of our early voting in Arizona. This is a huge thing, particularly in rural counties like Yavapai, like Coconino, where people don't have easy access to a voting location on election day necessarily. So our early voting systems are immensely important, and our voter registration systems are as well.
Mm-hmm.
I got inspired to run for this office because our extremely, she is just a rock star of a county recorder, Patty Hansen, has decided that it is time for her to retire, and we could not leave this seat open to election deniers, which my opponent is. Bob Thorpe is absolutely an election denier.
I was going to
have election.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you what you know about Bob Flood, but continue on why you're doing this.
Right. So it is a real and present danger to protect this office. Our country is founded on this idea that we get to have consent of the governed, and that only happens when we have access to the vote. My other reason that I pulled to run for this office was that I've always appreciated the big picture. I care so much about so many different issues that impact our day-to-day lives. I am raising children. I have 2 elementary-age children, and I care so much about their future, both the climate, their education, their safety in school, all of those things. And I cannot give all of my energy to all of those things, but I can give all of my energy to making sure that democracy works and that everybody has a voice. And all of those things, I firmly believe that our country looks much more the way we want it to when more people participate in our democracy.
Well, absolutely. And among the reasons I wanted to have you on the show today is that my biggest issue hobby horse for years, even before Donald Trump, was the issue of voting rights. And you heard at the beginning of the show how I talked about what they're doing in Indiana to prevent Purdue University college students from voting on campus, which they do in many places around the country. I mean, I make this speech at a lot of the fundraisers I do in New York, which is that, Democrats and liberals and progressive have a slew of issues that they are for and they fight for, whether it's LGBTQ rights or climate change laws or gun safety laws. You go down the list, the abortion rights, but none of those things can happen unless the most fundamental right is secured, which is the right to vote. And for decades, the Republican Party has been doing everything they can to suppress and nullify votes. And they're doing it right now. So that's why I think what you're trying to do and what you're fighting for and to win this election is so vitally important.
100%. And I share that vision and sentiment completely. And that is why I am running for this seat. And Coconino County has had excellent election services for decades now. And this is a stat that surprises so many people. Over 80% of Arizona receives their ballot in the mail, and they vote early. Of all political persuasions, Arizona has been doing this for over 30 years. We have a good system, a secure system, a reliable system, a trustworthy system that people really want to have available to them. And the Republican Party right now is trying to take that away.
Yeah. In Coconino County, just what's the approximate population, and does Coconino County lean red or blue, or is it kind of split down the middle?
So Coconino County has approximately, I want to say, 130,000 people living in it. It is geographically the second largest county in the entire United States. So we're real spread out, and we've got lots of rural communities. It leans Democratic. We have about a third of Republican, about a third Democrat, and about a third independent, but those independents do tend to lean Democratic in our county.
Yeah, hopefully this election cycle, they'll definitely lean that way. So your opponent in this race, as you mentioned before, is a guy named Bob Thorpe. I don't know much about him other than he's the Republican candidate. So tell us what you know about him. Is he more MAGA or more normal, and what did you learn about him when you debated him in August?
So I'm going to take this in reverse order. I learned about him that he is who his actions say he is, and he is an absolute liar. as you were talking with Mike about education systems, I want to emphasize that Bob Thorpe was in our state legislature for 8 years, and his two pet projects were expanding gun access on college campuses and limiting voting access on college campuses. He has bills saying that students should not have access to use their dorm address as a legitimate voting address.
So he obviously would be totally on board with what's happening in Indiana at Purdue University, no doubt.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. You won't get that from him as he is campaigning right now. He sounds very reasonable at the moment. But his actions in the state legislature leading up to his very final action when they called the special session for the resolution for the fake electors in 2020, his signature is on that resolution. It was his very last act in the state legislature.
Do you think people in Coconino County who are going to vote in this election are aware that an election denier and a voter suppression guy is running for the recorder's office, which is supposed to protect voting?
Protect voting. I am working my tail off to make sure that as many people as I can reach know that that is the case.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are a lot of people that do know that he has a terrible track record in our state legislature, and he is not particularly popular amongst, certainly not amongst Democrats, and I haven't heard a lot of independents that find him an appealing candidate. So I am optimistic that we are going to get me into office, and we are going to hold the line here, because we have several recorders' offices that are going to be challenged by election deniers this year.
Yeah, one of the things that occurs to me about this Bob Thorpe candidacy, when somebody who is in the legislature suddenly decides that they're going to run for a county office like the recorder's office, I'm wondering, and I know this is speculation on my part and it would be on your part, do you think that he was recruited specifically to go for that role so he could do what he could to undermine the election process in Coconino County? I know that's a lot to accuse somebody of, but what's your take on that?
It is absolutely 100% speculation. However, I have it on good authority that Wendy Rogers entered the Coconino County Recorder's office asking our current recorder if she was going to run for re-election. And when Wendy Rogers was told that the seat was going to be open this election cycle, 2 days later, Bob Thorpe pulled papers.
Wow. Yeah, doesn't surprise me.
You draw your conclusions from that.
Yeah. During the debate that you had with him, and I didn't get a chance to see it, I read a little bit about it. Was he doing any 2020 election denying comments, or what did you glean from some of the things? Go ahead.
So his biggest thing that was the problem, he denied any knowledge of his signature on the fake elector resolution. He couldn't quite back off of defending his students shouldn't vote at their dorm address bill. He wanted to defend that. But his big thing was that he has pulled up some mysterious list of 6,000 voters on the voter registration roll that he thinks are inactive and ineligible and have been kept on the voter roll fraudulently. He has not ever produced this list so that we can fact check it. I believe he is just stirring up fear and spreading lies. And if he could provide actual information, we could check on this. But as it stands right now, there are not 6,000 voters on our voter list in Coconino County that are ineligible and shouldn't be on that voter list.
Yeah. Are you aware? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that we have, and I've been in the office shadowing, not recently because there's ballots in the office and They don't allow people in there during ballot time. But I have been in there shadowing, and I know that they have a rigorous daily process for filtration list. There's no reason to doubt that this is being done well, conscientiously, and safely.
Are you aware of any coordination between him and the Yavapai County recorder, whose name escapes me right now? I know she is a Republican, although I've heard her speak at Democrats of the Red Rocks meeting, a breakfast that you were also at, and she seems to be an even-handed person who tries to be fair and square. But are you aware of any connection between her and Thorpe?
I'm not.
Okay. All right. So we'll let that lie. So tell us a little bit. Let's assume you're in the office, and we hope you will be. So once you take office, like, what are your first moves? What are you responsible for right off the bat, and what are you going to try to achieve as the Coconino County Recorder?
Sure. I think first and foremost, I want people to think about the fact that, so many of us receive our ballots in the mail, and that is such an important service that we get. And this is an office of service. This is an office that serves all of our voters. It serves our communities, and it serves the institution of democracy itself. And we absolutely must maintain and hold that line. That is bar zero, and that is where we will start. Make sure that is defended and held to account. One of the big responsibilities of the county recorder is to lobby for or against bills moving through the legislature that are going to affect our ability to vote. And so I will be tuning in very carefully and lobbying, hopefully, for, if we have a strong Democratic state legislature, if we have a majority in our legislature, then hopefully we're going to see some really strong voting rights legislation moving through. And I want to make sure that we are supporting that, encouraging that, and making sure that it gets instituted into our recorder's offices and our voting system.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also want to make sure that we continue to expand our ability to engage with and educate the community about registering to vote, about what's going to be on their ballot, about how they can vote. These are all things that, like you started with me, people don't know that this is what the recorder's office does. And it is really, really important to their basic rights. As we talk about students being able to vote and whether or not they're even allowed to register to vote, their voices are so important. Our student voices, our native voices, that our communities that have been left behind, they need to be heard. And the only way that works is if they have access to the vote.
Absolutely.
So continuing to expand our education and our outreach work will be one of my big priorities.
Yeah, that's I don't know about you, but I think one of the big disconnects in people not understanding what the recorder's office does is the fact that it's called the recorder. For some reason, I don't think people associate that word with voting. So maybe the solution is coming up with another name for the office. I don't know how you feel about that, but that's, what occurred to me.
That's interesting. I don't know that we could do that without legislation. I don't think we can change the names of offices.
Right.
But that might be an interesting one to lobby for if we, pull a community brainstorm together and see what would actually resonate with people.
I just bring stuff like that up because I'm a writer and editor, so those are the kind of things that jump out at me is how things are phrased. But one thing I wanted to ask you is, what kind of interaction have you had with Secretary of State Fontes as far as support, if he can even do that, and advice, if you've been able to get any from him.
I've gotten some interaction with several of the other county recorders in the state. Francis has been a little hard to get a hold of.
Yeah, he's very busy.
They've been in the middle of a lot of...
Yeah.
He's very busy.
Yeah.
So I've had relatively minimal interaction with him, but I am very hopeful that in this last month, and certainly assuming I get into office, that I will be in serious conversations with him going forward.
Oh, I'm sure you will, one way or another. So tell all of our listeners how they can learn more about you, how they can contribute to the campaign, and anything else you want to say in the couple of minutes we have left.
Absolutely. My website is Aubrey4Recorder.com. It's really simple and easy to remember. You don't have to deal with my last name. And I have a Facebook account that's linked there as well, and things are happening on the Facebook account. I'm running most of this myself, so oftentimes I'm a little behind on updating the Facebook, but the website is a great place to go to find out more about me, what I'm up to. I've got a calendar on it. I've got a donation button. I've got my contact information for people to reach out to the campaign. So I am very responsive to all of that. And that is probably the best way to reach me. I will be at the Coconino County Democracy Fair today from noon to 4. So if people want to come and meet me in person, I will be there.
Oh, where is that?
And it's going to be at the Du Bois Ballroom on NAU campus.
Excellent. Well, Aubrey, I wish you the best of luck. As I said, voting rights is very important to me, and we need a strong Democratic candidate in that Coconino County Recorder job. So, folks, that's it for today's Patriotic Progressive. I've been your host, Stephen Hanks, and I want to sincerely thank my two guests, Mike Fogel, Democratic candidate for the Arizona State Senate for District 1, and as you just heard, Aubrey Sonderegger, Democratic candidate for Coconino County Recorder. Mike and Aubrey, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thank you very much, Stephen, and good luck to you, Audrey.
Good luck to both of you. We'll be pulling for you. So that's it for today's show. Many thanks to I have a double header producer in the booth today. Both Chuck Helstein and Ryan Thompson have been helping me out behind the glass. I want to thank them. I'll be on vacation next week, but you should tune in again next Saturday morning from 8 to 9 a.m. when you'll hear a replay of a July show when my guests were the 3 Democratic candidates running for the Arizona Corporation Commission. And you really need to know who they are and why those races are vital to everyone in Arizona. They deal with major issues in the state, and we need Democrats in those seats. So listen to next week's show for the candidates running for the Arizona Corporation Commission. And remember, you can live stream our show on mellowmountainradio.com, hear the podcast version on Apple and Amazon Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and now my Substack newsletter, Patriotic Progressive. And at 10 a.m. this morning, please tune into Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks, when the theme will be, If You Build a Church, They Will Come, with my special in-studio guest, Pastor Elizabeth Lemaster of the newly emerging Sedona United Methodist Church. But for now, thanks for listening to the Patriotic Progressive for truth, justice, and the Democratic way. Have a great week, everyone.